After hearing from Colonel Lu Yiqing that the 835th defense line had fallen due to a beast horde, Lu Sheng's expression changed drastically. Shock and concern washed over his features as he looked intently at Lu Yiqing. Is it true that the defensive line of the 835th Division has been destroyed? He asked, his voice tight with urgency. Lu Yiqing nodded solemnly. Yes, it's true. The beasts overran our defenses. Lu Sheng closed his eyes, focusing inwardly as he activated his perception ability. His body began to emit a vibrant purple energy that pulsed with power. The air around him seemed to hum and crackle with intensity. Lu Yiqing watched in awe, his expression changing to one of surprise and curiosity. Is this his psychic power? He thought, feeling the formidable energy that seemed to penetrate his very soul. Several seconds later, Lu Sheng slowly opened his eyes, the purple energy gradually dissipating. He fixed Lu Yiqing with a serious gaze and asked, Does military headquarters know that the defensive line has collapsed? And will there be reinforcements on the way to tackle the beast horde? Lu Yiqing met Lu Sheng's eyes and calmly explained, Our superiors have told us that they have already sent reinforcements, but for now, we have received orders to evacuate the defense line. Lu Sheng's brow furrowed. Then why didn't you evacuate? Lu Yiqing's demeanor grew somber. He looked down at the ground, his voice tinged with sadness. Our commander did not retreat. He died fighting the beast horde. We couldn't bring ourselves to leave either. We thought it would be better to kill one more mutant beast before dying. We didn't care whether we lived or died. We just wanted to honor our commander's sacrifice. Lu Sheng remained silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of Lu Yiqing's words. The gravity of the situation settled heavily on him. His face turned grim as he contemplated the consequences of the breached defense line. What are the consequences now that the defense line has been breached by the beast horde? He asked, his voice serious and steady. Lu Yiqing stood frozen, his mind racing with horrific visions of what would come if the beast horde wasn't stopped in time. He could almost see it. The defense line walls crumbling under the relentless assault, blood splattered everywhere, and the anguished cries of soldiers fighting a losing battle. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead as he stared blankly at the ground, immersed in his grim imaginings. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke to Lu Sheng, explaining the dire consequences if the defensive line wasn't recovered soon. If we can't recover the defensive line in time, Lu Yiqing said, his tone heavy with dread, the beast horde will advance further, affecting both sides of the defense line. More mutant beasts will emerge, pushing towards several other lines of defense. He gestured around them, to the ruined city where they stood. Look at this place, Lu Sheng. If the beast horde advances, our defense lines will end up like this city. Ruined buildings and ominous energy everywhere. It will lead to a massacre. Lu Sheng stayed silent, listening intently. His eyes scanned the ruins of the city, imagining the catastrophic future Lu Yiqing described. The thought of such destruction was sobering. He put both hands in his pants pockets, walking past Lu Yiqing as he processed the information. I understand the situation, he said, his voice calm and resolute. Lu Yiqing was shocked by Lu Sheng's nonchalant response. Panic surged through him as he turned and called after Lu Sheng, his voice rising in urgency. Wait, where are you going? That direction leads to the war zone, where the beast horde erupted from spatial cracks. Lu Sheng didn't break his stride. Blue energy began to emanate from his body, swirling around him with a determined intensity. He glanced back at Lu Yiqing, his eyes fierce with resolve. Don't worry about me, he said. I need to take a look for myself. Before Lu Yiqing could utter another word, Lu Sheng's body became enveloped in a radiant blue energy, a phenomenon that lit up the surroundings with a mesmerizing glow. In the blink of an eye, this light intensified, and Lu Sheng vanished, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. His last words to Lu Yiqing echoed in the silence. I will try to fix the situation at the war zone. Lu Yiqing was left staring blankly at the spot where Lu Sheng had just been. His eyes were wide with astonishment, his mind racing to comprehend the rapid turn of events. The sheer power and speed Lu Sheng exhibited were beyond anything he had ever witnessed. How can one person handle such a dire situation? He wondered, his thoughts a whirlwind of awe and apprehension. Meanwhile, far from Lu Yiqing's astonished gaze, Lu Sheng was moving at a speed that defied belief. His form was a blur as he leaped effortlessly from one building to another. Each leap covered vast distances, and his trajectory was unwavering, his focus solely on reaching the war zone. As he propelled himself through the air, Lu Sheng activated his heightened perception. He clenched his fists, and with a deep breath, he closed his eyes momentarily, allowing his mind to extend its reach. Instantly, he began to sense the chaotic energy emanating from the war zone. It was a maelstrom of fear, pain, and desperation. He could feel the presence of countless soldiers, their life forces flickering like candles in a storm, threatened by the onslaught of mutant beasts. The sheer number of beasts was staggering. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, swarmed the area, their monstrous forms wreaking havoc and leaving destruction in their wake. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the sound of roars and screams. Lu Sheng's jaw tightened as he felt the agony and terror of the soldiers being overwhelmed. Within seconds, he landed gracefully on the ground, just a mile from the defensive line. He raised his head, his eyes scanning the horizon. The sight before him was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. Dominating the battlefield was a colossal mutant beast, dragon-like in appearance, with two enormous horns jutting from its head. This beast was unlike any other, its presence commanding and fearsome. It was gathering a terrifying red lightning around its horns, the energy crackling ominously as it prepared to unleash a devastating attack. Surrounding the giant dragon were numerous smaller beasts, each one poised to strike, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. The ground shook with their movements, and the air vibrated with their growls. Lu Sheng's mind raced as he surveyed the scene. He scanned the defense line, desperately searching for any signs of life. Amidst the chaos, he spotted several soldiers who were still alive, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. They clung to their positions, fighting valiantly despite the overwhelming odds. Determined, Lu Sheng steeled himself. He knew he had to act swiftly and decisively. A bit further from the main area of chaos, several overturned tanks lay strewn across the battlefield, silent witnesses to the ferocity of the ongoing conflict. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the distant roars of mutant beasts. Near these massive war machines, 3 men sat huddled, taking what little cover they could find, while another man stood atop one of the overturned tanks, surveying the situation with a grim expression. The man on the tank, a stern figure with a determined glint in his eyes, spoke with a heavy tone. "Casualties keep increasing," he said, his voice carrying the weight of their dire circumstances. "More beasts are rushing out of the spatial crack." Among the soldiers taking cover, one man had lost an arm in the ferocious battle. His makeshift bandage was stained with blood, and he clutched his severed limb with his remaining hand. The pain etched on his face was evident, but he fought to keep his composure. Turning his head towards his comrade, a short, bald soldier with a white beard, he asked, "What should we do now that the commander is also dead?" The bald soldier, holding a grenade in his hands, removed the safety pin and stared at it intently, a strange smile playing on his lips. He looked at his injured comrade and replied, "You're really asking me what we should do now?" Without waiting for a response, he raised his hand above the tank and threw the grenade toward the advancing horde of beasts. Seconds later, the grenade exploded, shattering the bodies of several beasts into grotesque pieces. As chunks of flesh and bone flew through the air, the bald soldier gestured dramatically with his hands, looking upwards. He opened his mouth and began to laugh loudly, a sound filled with a mix of defiance and madness. "We keep killing the beasts," he shouted. "Rather than looking for a way out, let's help our deceased commander earn some honor. Keep on killing." Meanwhile, the man who stood atop the tank had 2 cigars clenched between his teeth, the smoke curling around his rugged face. In each hand, he wielded a mini machine gun, firing relentlessly at the charging beasts. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he mowed down the enemy, his stance unwavering. He stared at the beasts with an almost feverish anticipation, the thrill of the fight fueling his every move. As he imagined the monetary rewards for each beast they killed, a wide grin spread across his face. Every extra beast kill means more money, he thought, his mind racing with the potential gains. He glanced down at the bald soldier, his excitement mounting. "As soon as I run out of ammo, I'm joining you," he decided, his resolve hardening. Amidst the turmoil, the bald soldier with a white beard peered over the edge of the tank, a remote control clenched tightly in his hand. The remote was the key to a devastating bomb, and as he surveyed the advancing beasts, a smile crept across his weathered face. Turning his gaze to the burly man who stood atop the tank, he spoke with a chilling calmness. "Long ago, I prepared enough explosives to reduce this area to ashes. Once I press this button, the explosives will activate, and all the beasts will die without leaving a trace." Behind the tank, another grim scene unfolded. A man with black hair lay unconscious on the ground, his head and abdomen heavily bandaged. He was a tragic figure, a casualty of the fierce battle. The soldier with the severed arm, sitting beside him, placed his hand on his knee and turned to the bald soldier. "Old Tao might not be able to survive if the fight continues like this," he said, his voice tinged with concern. The bald soldier, still gripping the remote, approached them and stared silently at Old Tao. The weight of their predicament hung heavily in the air. They were caught between the desire to save their fallen comrade and the harsh reality of the battle they were fighting. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the other side of the tank. The burly man, who had been valiantly holding the line against the mutant beasts with his machine guns, was thrown backward by the force of the blast. As he hit the ground, a beast pounced on him, severing his right hand with a swift and brutal strike. He opened his mouth and screamed in agony, the sound piercing through the chaos. The bald soldier and the one beside him looked up, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. The sight of their comrade, now maimed and in excruciating pain, was a harsh blow to their morale. The bald soldier's expression changed drastically, his eyes wide with terror. "Now that another one of us has lost an arm," he thought, "we are doomed." The bald soldier, driven by an unyielding resolve, decided that standing idle was not an option. He approached a nearby rock, clutching a heavy bag filled with bombs in one hand. With the other hand, he began hurling the bombs at the encroaching beasts, his movements swift and precise. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the air, momentarily halting the beast's advance. His teeth clenched tightly as he fought, the determination to annihilate the mutant beasts burning in his eyes. Minutes slipped by in this furious defense. He reached into the bag, his fingers searching for more bombs, only to find it empty. A sinking feeling of dread washed over him. He had used all the grenades. He looked down at the ground, the weight of their dire situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. Clenching his teeth even tighter, he realized they were in deep trouble. As a last resort, he pulled out the remote control for the hidden explosives scattered across the war zone. The cold metal of the remote felt like a lifeline and a death sentence simultaneously. While he held the remote control, the burly soldier, who had just lost his hand, sat in a trench, leaning against the wall. Blood poured from his severed limb, but he pressed his other hand against the wound, trying to stem the flow. Sweat streamed down his forehead, mixing with the dirt and blood that covered his face. The other soldier, who had also lost an arm, saw his comrade's desperate state and approached him. He sat down beside him, working quickly to bandage the wound. Their camaraderie was a small light in the overwhelming darkness, a testament to their unbreakable spirit. Suddenly, several mutant beasts began to close in on their position. The bald soldier turned his back on the advancing horrors, his gaze falling on his injured comrades. He gripped the remote control tightly and looked at the others, a sense of grim determination in his eyes. He knew what needed to be done. "It's time," he thought, "to accompany our commander in death." At that moment, a powerful gust of wind, infused with blue energy, swept across the battlefield. The three soldiers, weary and battle-scarred, instinctively raised their hands to shield their faces from the sudden, overwhelming force. The wind was unlike anything they had felt before, and they could only wonder at its origin. The sky above them darkened momentarily as a powerful tornado formed in the area, its swirling vortex crackling with thunderbolts that struck the ground with electrifying intensity. The beasts, relentless in their assault, were driven back by the sheer force of the storm. It was as if nature itself had intervened in their desperate struggle for survival. As the tornado began to dissipate, the soldiers squinted through the fading whirlwind, straining to see what new force had entered the fray. From the heart of the storm, a figure descended, landing gracefully on the ground with a resounding thud. This figure, clad in sturdy military boots and emanating a formidable blue aura, was none other than Lu Sheng. His presence was commanding, his body surrounded by a pulsating blue energy that hinted at his immense power. In one hand, he held a spear, its blade glinting ominously in the dim light. Lu Sheng's eyes scanned the battlefield, quickly assessing the situation. His gaze fell upon the three soldiers, and he called out to them, his voice strong and reassuring, "Are you okay? If you can stand, retreat now." The soldiers turned their heads towards Lu Sheng, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. They could hardly believe what they were seeing. Who was this man, and where had he come from? The bald soldier, the first to react, stared at Lu Sheng, tears welling up in his eyes. Overwhelmed with emotion, he began to cry, his voice choked with relief and excitement. Reinforcements, he whispered, the word feeling almost foreign on his lips. They've finally arrived. Meanwhile, the soldier who had lost his arm grabbed his comrade, who had lost his hand. They both looked at the bald soldier, their faces etched with confusion and a glimmer of hope. The bald soldier, his fists clenched, started jumping with joy. His voice, filled with newfound energy, rang out, "We don't want to die here. Everyone, retreat quickly." Meanwhile, Lu Shang gathered momentum, his movements fluid and precise. With a penetrating gaze, he advanced towards the mutant beasts, his spear slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. Each swing of his weapon cut through the beasts in his path, their roars of defiance quickly silenced by his relentless assault. His every step was purposeful, each strike a testament to his unparalleled skill. In the trench, the soldier with the severed arm looked at Old Tao, unconscious but alive. With a determined grunt, he lifted Old Tao over his shoulder, the weight of his comrade nothing compared to the burden of survival. They all began to emerge from their hiding place, the urgency of escape driving them forward. The bald soldier was the last to come out, his eyes darting around to assess the situation. The soldier with the severed hand reached out, grabbing the bald soldier's hand to steady him. Together, they turned their attention to Lu Shang. The soldier with the severed arm called out, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief, "Look at the reinforcement." Upon hearing this, all of them turned towards Lu Shang's direction, their eyes widening in shock. A few miles away, they could see several explosions erupting continuously. The mutant beasts, once fearsome and unrelenting, were now being decimated, their bodies torn apart by Lu Shang's onslaught. The air was thick with the scent of scorched earth and the cries of dying beasts. As they watched more closely, they realized something that seemed impossible. The reinforcement was just one person. One man was single-handedly turning the tide of the battle. They couldn't believe their eyes. The bald soldier's mouth fell open, and he began to cry again, not out of despair this time, but out of sheer amazement and hope. The old man, sweat pouring down his forehead, stared at Lu Shang, his eyes wide with shock. He had thought their situation hopeless, that they were all doomed to die. But watching Lu Shang fight, he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. This one man was more than a match for the mutant beasts. Meanwhile, Lu Shang was immersed in the thrill of the fight. He landed on the ground with an earth-shattering explosion, his powerful presence sending shockwaves through the battlefield. With a spear in hand, he slashed the beasts around him into pieces, his movements a blur of deadly precision. His descent had been swift and destructive, but he didn't stop there. Each swing of his spear was a calculated move to kill any beasts that dared to block his path. One of the beasts, a massive creature with razor-sharp claws, attempted to attack him from behind. Lu Shang, attuned to the dangers around him, reacted instantly. With a swift turn and a powerful thrust, he cut its body in half, the beast's roar silenced as it fell to the ground. He continued his relentless assault, his spear slicing through flesh and bone, reducing his enemies to a gruesome pile of corpses. After finishing off many beasts, Lu Shang paused, gripping his spear tightly with one hand. He stood atop the pile of bodies, his chest heaving with exertion. For a moment, he allowed himself to assess the situation. More beasts emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent as they advanced rapidly towards him. Lu Shang's sharp eyes scanned the battlefield, realizing the sheer number of beasts. He finally understood why the defensive line of the 835th Division had been breached. The beast horde seemed endless, their numbers overwhelming even after he had killed hundreds of them. There was no end in sight, and the realization settled heavily on his shoulders. Determined, Lu Shang leaned his spear on his shoulder, his gaze unwavering as he stared at the approaching beasts. He knew he had to change his strategy. The current method was not enough to stem the tide. With a deep breath, he grabbed his spear with one hand and stood atop the pile of corpses, a towering figure of resolve and strength. At that moment, the Valkyrie Grandmaster's spirit appeared behind him. She wore gleaming metal armor, her presence radiating an aura of icy power. She had been a formidable warrior in life, and now, her spirit lent Lu Shang her strength. The connection between them was palpable, a fusion of their energies and skills. Lu Shang focused his mind, activating the Frost Sparrow technique he had obtained after defeating the Valkyrie Grandmaster and inheriting her mantle. His expression shifted, determination hardening into resolve. He channeled the icy energy, feeling it surge through his veins, amplifying his power. With a forceful motion, Lu Sheng threw his spear towards the mutant beasts. The spear shot through the air with incredible speed, the imprisoning spear skill from the Frost Sparrow technique enhancing its destructive power. Wherever it passed, the ground froze, a trail of icy death leading towards the beasts. The spear struck with unerring accuracy, hitting the heart of the mutant horde. An explosion of ice and frost erupted, obliterating the beasts in a split second. Their bodies shattered into fragments, the freezing energy reducing them to nothingness. The sheer power of the attack left a swath of destruction in its wake. Seeing the massacre, the otherworldly mutant beasts that still stood nearby were struck with terror. Their confidence shattered, they began to flee, their instincts driving them away from the deadly force that was Lu Sheng. Lu Sheng stood amidst the battlefield, his eyes sharp and unwavering as he surveyed the approaching mutant beasts. Smoke billowed from his mouth, a testament to the intense power simmering within him. A confident smile spread across his face as he contemplated the possibilities of his newfound abilities. Mastery over ice was formidable, but the thought of combining it with fire intrigued him. The elements, so contrasting yet complementary, promised a display of unparalleled might. As the beasts closed in, Lu Sheng clenched his fist, and a radiant golden energy began to emanate from his being. The air around him crackled with anticipation. He could now manipulate not just one, but multiple elements simultaneously. His control had reached a new pinnacle, hinting at the profound potential of the natural breathing method he had honed. With a fierce grin, Lu Sheng prepared for the onslaught. He could feel the power surging through him, a blend of raw, untamed elements. In a fluid motion, he summoned the forces of thunder and flame. The ground beneath him trembled as he struck it with his fist, unleashing a cataclysmic wave of energy. Thunder roared and fire blazed, merging into a destructive force that shattered the earth and surged towards the beasts. The impact was immediate and devastating. The ground split open, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. Fire and thunder engulfed the mutant beasts, their monstrous forms incinerated in an instant. The acrid smell of burnt flesh filled the air, mingling with the smoke and dust. Lu Sheng stood at the epicenter of the destruction, his presence commanding and unyielding. Seconds later, Lu Sheng's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the aftermath. The beasts lay in ruins, but the battle was far from over. He reached for his spear, the familiar weight grounding him. With a determined sigh, he launched himself into the air, soaring high above the battlefield. The wind whipped around him, carrying with it the promise of victory. Holding the spear aloft with one hand, Lu Sheng focused his energy. He channeled the breath of earth and wind, feeling the elemental forces converge around him. Earth energy surged through his veins, solid and unyielding, while wind energy swirled around him, swift and relentless. The energies coalesced around his spear, imbuing it with a power that shimmered and pulsated. As he descended, Lu Sheng's eyes blazed with determination. The beasts below were mere obstacles, and he would obliterate them. He fixed them with a disdainful gaze, his voice carrying a cold command. "Go back to where you came from," he spat, his words laced with contempt. Using all his strength, Lu Sheng hurled the spear towards the ground. The spear struck with a resounding impact, and the energy it carried exploded outward. The earth groaned and cracked, fissures spreading like wildfire. The wind howled, amplifying the destructive force. The combined might of earth and wind obliterated the ground, reducing it to fragments. The mutant beasts, caught in the maelstrom, were torn apart, their bodies disintegrating in the face of Lu Sheng's power.